froze mid-shout. She looked at me with my shirt soaked in coffee and started giggling, then full-on laughing until she couldn't breathe. I started laughing too because here we were fighting about fake money from our fake relationship while living together in a real one. She collapsed next to me on the wet couch, still wheezing about the whole stupid thing. After we calmed down, she got this serious look and went to my kitchen cabinet, pulled out an empty pickle jar, and wrote "truth jar" on it with a Sharpie. "Every lie from now on costs $5, she said. Even tiny ones like saying you're fine when you're not, and the money goes to our first real vacation. I immediately had to put in $20 for various work excuses, and she put in 15 for telling her mom we were too busy to visit last weekend. The jar filled up fast that first week. 3 months later, everything changed when Marcus called us over for Sunday dinner, but wouldn't say why. We found the whole family gathered around Elena's laptop, watching some viral video about wedding disasters that turned into love stories. There we were at Sasha's wedding, the fight, the kiss, everything, with over 2 million views and comments about how we were relationship goals. Someone had done research and posted that Sasha and Kian's marriage lasted exactly 3 weeks before she caught him with her yoga instructor. Meanwhile, photos of Renee and me at the farmer's market the previous weekend were being shared everywhere as proof that fake relationships can become real love. The video licensing company contacted us that week, offering $5,000 for exclusive rights. 2 weeks after that, Renee's grandmother, who everyone just called Grandma Miller, invited us to her house for tea. Just us, no one else. She lived in this massive Victorian in Pacific Heights that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. We sat in her parlor while she poured Earl Grey into actual china cups that looked older than the house. She put down her teacup and announced she was rewriting her will because Sasha showed poor judgment, Renee showed courage, but I showed character, and that mattered most. She'd already called her lawyer and wanted us there when she signed the changes. The news spread through the family within hours. Sasha called Renee screaming that we'd manipulated a senile old woman, that we planned the whole fake relationship to steal her inheritance. Marcus and Elena took our side, but Sasha convinced her brother and 2 cousins that we were con artists. The family split into camps with accusations flying on the group text that got so ugly, Elena finally deleted it. Sasha hired some expensive lawyer from her father's firm to contest the will change, claiming undue influence and fraud. The lawyer sent us a letter full of legal threats about elder abuse and conspiracy that made my hands shake when I read it. We used the money from the viral video to hire our own lawyer, this woman named Patricia, who'd handled Elena's friend's divorce. She reviewed everything, our text messages, the contract I'd stupidly saved on my laptop, the timeline of our relationship, then leaned back in her chair. The timeline actually helps us, she said, because our relationship clearly predated any will changes, and she found it ironic that our fake documentation would serve as real evidence. The depositions were brutal. 6 hours of questions about every detail of our relationship under oath. When did the fake parts end and the real parts begin? What was performance and what was genuine? Every text message dissected for meaning. Renee cried twice during hers, and I threw up in the courthouse bathroom during a break in mine. But it felt weirdly good too, finally telling the complete truth about everything. Even the embarrassing parts like practicing boyfriend voice in the supply closet. Sasha's lawyer presented our original contract in court like he'd found the smoking gun, reading it out loud with dramatic pauses. But then Patricia presented the marketing company's whole campaign as counter evidence, showing we'd been publicly together for months since the wedding with no contract needed. She had receipts from dinners, tagged photos from friends, even security footage from my apartment building showing Renee basically living there. Sasha's lawyer reading their fake dating contract out loud in court like he's performing Shakespeare, while Patricia just casually pulls out security footage as peak legal drama comedy. Nothing says true love like documented evidence and time-stamped receipts. The judge asked pointed questions about the contract terms versus our actual relationship timeline. The night before the ruling, Renee couldn't sleep, kept tossing and turning until I finally turned on the light at 3 a.m. She sat up panicking about losing everything. Her family, the money, maybe even me if this went badly. I reminded her we started with nothing real and built something anyway, that we were good at making fake things true. She kissed me then, really kissed me, not like the wedding performance, but like she needed to make sure I was real. 2 weeks later, we sat in the courtroom holding hands so tight my fingers went numb while the judge read her decision. She ruled completely in our favor, stating the will changes were made by a competent adult with no evidence of coercion. But then she added something that made Sasha storm out of the courtroom. She noted that what began as deception evolved into genuine affection, which she said was more than could be said for many relationships that start honestly, clearly referring to Sasha's 3-week marriage. Sasha just stood there for a second, then her face crumpled and she started crying right there in the courtroom. Not the angry tears I expected, but tired ones, like she'd been holding them back for months. She slumped into her chair and covered her face with both hands, while her lawyer awkwardly patted her shoulder. Grandma Wilson walked over and put a hand on Sasha's arm, offering her a tissue from her purse. She said something quiet that made Sasha look up, and after a minute Sasha nodded and signed some papers her lawyer pulled out. Later I found out Grandma Wilson offered her a smaller part of the inheritance if she agreed to get therapy, which Sasha accepted without fighting. 2 days later my phone buzzed with a text from Kian, suggesting we all grab a beer and move forward. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds before deleting it and blocking his number. Renee watched me do it and squeezed my hand, but didn't say anything. Some things you forgive and some you just leave behind. 3 weeks passed before Renee suggested we go back to the coffee shop where we'd written our fake boyfriend contract. The same barista was working and recognized us, making a joke about framing our original contract since we'd become regulars. Instead of laughing, Renee pulled out a notebook and started writing something new. Not a contract this time, but a list of promises, real ones without payment terms or breakup clauses. She wrote that she promised to tell me when she was scared. I wrote that I promised to stay even when things got complicated. We both signed it, but this time it wasn't legally binding, just emotionally. The paper went into her purse where she kept it for the next 6 months. 6 months after the wedding disaster, Renee came home from work looking nervous and excited at the same time. Her company had offered her a promotion to run their Seattle office, nearly double her salary, but it meant leaving San Francisco. She explained all the details while pacing around my apartment, saying she understood if I couldn't leave my job and friends here. I let her finish her whole speech before pulling out my laptop and showing her the email I'd gotten the week before. A Seattle tech company had offered me a senior developer position with better pay and remote options for when we'd visit her family. Her mouth dropped open and she just stared at the screen. I'd been secretly interviewing for 3 months, researching Seattle companies and taking video calls during lunch breaks. She kept looking between me and the laptop like she couldn't process what she was seeing. I told her I'd practiced calling her babe in a supply closet and learned her dad's entire football roster and made up a whole Canadian ranch. Moving to Seattle was actually the easiest thing I'd done done for her. She tackled me onto the couch, and we stayed there for an hour just holding each other. That Sunday, we told her family at dinner. Nathan started crying until we promised he could visit and see the Space Needle, and maybe catch a Seahawks game. Marcus immediately pulled out his phone to research Seattle sports teams and started planning which games he'd fly up for. Elena just nodded like she'd known this was coming all along, then started making lists of what furniture we'd need for the new place. Grace offered to help us pack and asked if we'd found an apartment yet. 2 months later, we were knee-deep in boxes and packing tape. Renee found the folder where we'd kept all our fake relationship props, the rehearsal notes we'd written, printed texts planning our cover story, staged photos from those early family dinners. She held up the original contract with all its rules and clauses, asking if we should keep this stuff or throw it away. I took the folder and wrote origin story on the outside with a Sharpie. We packed it carefully between photo albums and other important documents, because even if it started as a lie, it became the foundation for something real, fake scaffolding that somehow held up an actual relationship. The drive to Seattle took 12 hours straight through. We packed everything that mattered into my car and her SUV, playing the same road trip games we used to rehearse for her family gatherings, except now the laughter came naturally without any planning. We stopped for gas in Reading and she bought every snack I reached for without asking, just like she'd been doing for months. The highway stretched ahead of us, and we took turns leading, switching positions every couple hours, texting each other stupid observations about billboards and weird cars, even though we were literally right there. Halfway through Oregon, she pulled over at a rest stop, and I thought something was wrong with her car, but she just stood there looking at me. "I love you," she said, and my brain short-circuited because there was no one around to perform for. I kissed her right there next to the vending machines while truckers walked past, and it was the first kiss that was just ours. We reached Seattle as the sun was setting over Puget Sound, painting everything gold, and found our new apartment building tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore. The place was smaller than what either of us could afford alone, but we wanted to build something together from scratch. Nathan's dinosaur collection was the first thing we unpacked because she'd promised him his own shelf in our new place. That first night, we were still setting up the bed when her phone rang with a video call from her whole family. They'd gathered at her parents' house for an impromptu goodbye dinner and wanted to show us what we were missing. "Distance doesn't change family," Elena said, and Marcus held up a beer to toast us through the screen. Then Grandma Smith took the phone and looked straight at me through the camera. "You showed up as an employee and left as family," she said, and I felt my throat close up. We promised to visit for Thanksgiving and ended the call with everyone waving and talking over each other. 3 days later, a package arrived with no return address, but I recognized Sasha's handwriting immediately. Inside was a note that made my hands shake. She wrote about starting therapy, learning to want her own happiness instead of taking everyone else's, thanking us for the wake-up call at the wedding. Under the note was a beautiful wooden frame with 2 spaces, one for a photo and one for a document. We put our favorite real picture from Nathan's birthday next to our original fake contract, the one with all its rules and payment terms, and the contrast told our whole story better than words could. 3 weeks into Seattle life, we had real routines that nobody had to plan or rehearse. Saturday mornings at the coffee shop downstairs, Sunday hikes at Discovery Park, Wednesday night video calls with Nathan where we read him stories and he showed us his new drawings. Everything felt easy in a way that our fake relationship never had, even when we got good at pretending. 6 months after that disaster of a wedding, we were walking through Pike Place Market on a random Tuesday when Renee stopped so suddenly I almost crashed into her. She turned around right there between the fish throwers and the flower stands, tourists flowing around us like water. "Let's get married," she said, and before I could process what was happening, I was already pulling out the ring I'd been carrying for 3 weeks. "I was thinking the same thing," I said, and she started crying and laughing at the same time. She said yes while the fish guys cheered and strangers took pictures and everything about it was messy and public and completely, absolutely real. Well, that's been quite the journey to share with you. Plenty to wonder about after everything we've seen together. Like the video, it helps more than you think.